The challenge is proving intent, that Adams knew that he was accepting illegal campaign contributions and bribes. It's much easier to prove the free gifts, the air travel, that kind of stuff. But really, the bread and butter of this indictment is the wire fraud accusation, which is a federal prosecutor's best friend. It's relatively easy to prove, and it can get you up to 20 years in prison. He's facing up to 45 years in total. I think the stuff that was laid out in the indictment shows that Adams allegedly was trying to obstruct, was trying to hide his involvement in all this, changing his passwords on his phone, trying to cover up the documents that would have shown that he took these trips and these campaign contributions. So they've got a good case against him. After all, they're not going to go after the powerful mayor of New York City unless they've got the goods.
Well, yeah, that was a question I had when this news first dropped. How ironclad does a case need to be to essentially make a sitting mayor of the country's largest city a criminal defendant? It was raised to me, though, earlier on the program, Dave, this notion that while this indictment is vivid in detail in terms of messaging and texting that was exchanged with Adams staffers and various others, included representatives from Turkish Airlines, for example, when it comes to some of this travel, not much of it is actual messaging from Adams himself. Is that a complicated factor here for the prosecution?
It'd be better if you have his own words, but they do have the cell phones and the computers of a lot of his associates. And that's how you know that the feds are serious. Once they have your electronic communications, something's going to go down. They've been investigating this for a while. I mean, they've traced this back for 9 years that he's allegedly received these improper benefits. And then they were specific that the alleged bribe occurred when the Turkish government sought to get an expedited approval of this 30-story consulate that was ready to go, except the fire department said that doesn't meet code. Well, they invested, allegedly, in Adams, and then Adams supposedly leaned on the fire department, and the certificate of occupancy was granted thereafter. So that's where you have your bribery, that's where you have your wire fraud in part, and then you have the abuse, allegedly, of the matching contribution laws in New York, where you're entitled to get matching campaign contributions if it comes from an individual donor. So then the Turkish government apparently funneled the money through individuals so that it could then be multiplied under the campaign finance laws. So he'd get advantage of that, and that's where he's also being charged. So he's got a lot of problems ahead, and I would suspect that some of the people closest to him will flip on him to save their own hides.
Well, and we have seen the resignation of a number of city officials, others who, of course, have had their own property searched over the course of the last several months as this corruption investigation was ongoing. Is that really what's the linchpin, the critical point here for the prosecution, is to get those flips to actually happen?
That matters a lot, to have him on the stand. Adams has some very prominent attorneys representing him. So the feds are going to have to come with all their firepower here. That means flipping witnesses who know where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking. Also using the electronic communications against Adams. One interesting anecdote in the indictment is that Adams apparently was tipped off that he was about to be searched, having his phone seized. So when the feds got his phones, he didn't have his personal phone on him. That was left at home or wherever. And then he previously had changed the password on that personal phone. The personal phone is where the more incriminating stuff apparently was. And he changed the password, made it much harder for the feds to access. And so he apparently knew what he was doing, and that's going to be used against him too. It's all about intent.
Finally, Dave, in our final moment with you, I'd like to ask you about a question, a legal case much closer to home in Florida, which, of course, was the attempted assassination of Donald Trump just weeks ago. The man, Ryan Ruth, who was initially charged with firearms charges related to that, was indicted on an attempted assassination charge just this week. How does that case move forward from here?
The feds are doing a good job. First, they started with the low-hanging fruit, the firearms offenses. That kept Ruth in jail, and then they came back after the evidence was developed to charge Ruth with attempted assassination. That can get the guy up to life in prison. So when Governor DeSantis and former President Trump accused the feds of small ball, no, they're going for it all here because they've got that handwritten note from Ruth that shows that he did apparently intend to assassinate Donald Trump. So the feds are going to move forward with this. Ruth will continue to plead not guilty. I don't think he gets a plea deal out of this unless it involves decades in prison. So he's not going anywhere anytime soon.